Well, welcome back. We're in Matthew chapter 12, verse 33. Been an action-packed chapter so far. We're not going to go back and review anything. Go back and have a listen. These are about 35 minutes long, give or take 5 minutes, really. And so they're not that long to listen to. Probably could listen to one or two on your commute. If you live in the Nashville area, you could listen to half a dozen on your commute. Matthew 12, 33. Make a tree good, and its fruit will be good. Make a tree bad, and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruit. These were expressions that were already in currency among the Jews. You can go back to Matthew chapter 7, for example. And he says, by their fruit you shall know them. These were expressions they knew, and he's using them to teach them a lesson. It gets really rough here. He says, you brood of vipers. In other words, your mamas were snakes. You came from snakes. How can you who are evil say anything good? For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. We talked about this a little bit last week, about our tendency to find the negative and be prepared to find fault before the discussion even gets started, before the event ever occurs. Here is another admonition: to watch what you're filling yourself up with. Revenge fantasies, arguments that are ahead of time so you'll know how to handle or what you should have said, grudges. What are you filling yourself up with? Because that's what's going to come out of you. What comes out of you is what you've spent your life putting into you. And so once again, I have many illustrations about this, but we've talked about this before. Spend your time putting good things into you, surrounding yourself with good things. It doesn't mean you have to listen to Christian music and not any other. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to read a mystery novel or something else rather than the Bible. It just means let's be careful about the attitudes and the thoughts that fill up our day. And then verse 36, I tell you that everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every empty word they have spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. Earlier in chapter 12, the prophecy of Isaiah is quoted as applying to Christ, and one of the lines is that no one will hear his voice in the streets. Now, I want you to hear me very carefully here. Some people are born with exuberance and with volume in their speech. I get that. My wife and I, however, saw a classic example of how this can go wrong recently when we took a catamaran cruise for a couple of hours. It's one of these things that you pony up $30 or $40, and you and a bunch of strangers get to sit around on little uncomfortable benches while a catamaran goes around an estuary a little bit into the ocean and back. Now, there was beauty to be seen there. Absolute beauty. There were dolphins to be seen. I'm sure there were manatees, and we didn't see any that night. Mangroves, and of course the ocean. A lot of beautiful things. However, we weren't allowed to enjoy them in peace because two of the people who had come on the catamaran needed to be the center of attention. And you were allowed to bring on your own food and drink, and these people had brought on their drink and drink. And they progressed to get louder and louder, moving around, getting right in front of people, and just constant, and even saying, hey, yeah, I know I'm loud. That's a problem. It's a problem. The Bible says when you speak, make it mean something. Now, some people are verbal processors, and they just have to talk to work their way through an issue. I get that as well. I'm not. It is so hard for people to believe that I'm an introvert, and it's so hard for people to believe what I say next. But people who know me know this is true. I don't talk much. Only when I'm working do I talk, or when somebody is asking me to talk. If I'm in a situation where talking is required, I talk. But I love it when Paul said, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. Now, what about those of you that are extroverted, exuberant, full of things, and your voices are made by God, not like mine, which is a quiet voice, but a very loud voice? All I'm saying is I have issues that I have to work with to fall into God's will. So do you. Introverts aren't going to tell you extroverts to be more like them, although extroverts will tell introverts to be more like them. What we are saying is be careful. It's not a defense just to say God made me this way. Although God made me quiet, I spend my life talking at work because I don't have the defense that God made me this way, so I don't have to talk to anybody. I'll just study my way, and no, I don't have that option. You may need to tone things down. Now, I would also suggest that you never tell anybody else to tone things down. Ever. You bind it on you. You don't bind it on others. We were not unkind or cruel or judgmental to these two. We felt like we were having a hard time just enjoying the evening, but we understood that this was the way they did their life. And kind of felt sorry for them that they needed the constant attention of others. You don't really need that. And you might want to get some help learning how to get attention from God, which you've already got, and enjoy that. And then surround yourself with some friends that like it when you talk and sing and are loud. That's fine. So once again, I'll get some emails and people are hurt. But here's the thing. None of us are born perfect. We all have to adjust our behavior daily. And that's what he's saying. Don't let the empty words just fill it up. Because you start filling the room with words, some of those words are going to go wrong. Somebody's going to be hurt. You're going to say the wrong words. Let's be careful about the words. Then some of the Pharisees and teachers of the law said to him, "Teacher, we want to see a sign from you." Now, he's been doing miracle. He's already done miracle in chapter 12. But not all the Pharisees are there all the time. So some others coming up, okay, yeah, you're saying some very, very offensive things and some things that make it sound like that you are greater and higher than the rest of us, as if you are the Son of God or something. And that's just intolerable. If you are, prove it. He answered, "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign." Now, does he mean there that if you would like a sign, a miracle from God, that you're wicked and adulterous? No, he's talking about them. He's saying, a wicked and adulterous generation is looking for a sign. Okay. So don't use what he just said to apply it to anybody except the group that was right in front of him at the time. Legalistic, full of themselves, very smug religious leaders. He said, none will be given to you, because he's talking to the others about them while they're right there, except the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because they repented at the teaching of Jonah, and now something greater than Jonah is here. The queen of the south, that would be Sheba, will rise at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. For she came from the ends of the earth to listen to Solomon's wisdom, and now something greater than Solomon is here. Did Jesus ever not tell people he was the Son of God? Of course he did. He didn't have to wear a sticker, "Hi, my name is the Son of God." He's doing it this way, very plainly. When an impure spirit comes out of a person, it goes through arid places seeking rest and does not find it. Then it says, "I'll return to the house I left." And when it arrives, it finds the house unoccupied, swept clean, put in order. Then it goes and takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and live there. And the final condition of that person is worse than the first. And that's how it will be with this wicked generation, as he's pointing back to the Pharisees. What's going on here? Is he giving them a lesson in demonology? No, he's not. He's saying Pharisees have tried to clean themselves up. They've swept clean their house. And they found a demon in there. They found problems in there, and they swept it out. Because we do need to remember this about the Pharisees. They really did believe they were the good guys. They really did believe that they were the ones trying to follow the law strictly and correctly, and that other people were not being obedient to God, that they needed to follow all these rules because God wanted all these rules. They were sincere in believing they were the good guys. And so they had conquered their demon, they thought. Jesus says, the demon's not gone. It's going to get some buddies. I know the number here is 7. To a Jew, that means as many as it takes. A complete number. And they're going to come back, and if that house isn't full and protected, doesn't matter that it's clean. They're coming in. And it's going to be worse for them than it was before. Worse for the religiously smug than it was before they tried to keep God's commands strictly. Whoa! You ever caught that before? How can it be worse than it was when they weren't obedient? Because disobedience God works with, and He wants us not to be disobedient. But to be smug, that's worse. That's worse. So just humility. God calls for it, and it's not easy. It really isn't. But humility is, that's the indoor sport we should be working on the most. Well, this is getting out of hand. So somebody's got to stop Jesus. So they go tell on him. And the next line, while Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak to him. Somebody told him, your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you. Now, we put together all the Gospels. We get a more complete understanding of what was going on here. Number one, Mama wasn't leading this parade. The brothers. Remember, Jesus' own brothers did not believe that he was the Son of God until after the resurrection. Because that kind of cinches the deal right there. But before then, they didn't believe him. Therefore, they didn't believe their own mother. Joseph's out of the picture, so the brothers are in charge. Should have been Jesus, but he's the oldest brother, but he's gone off the rails. They think he's gone crazy. Again, read all 4 Gospels, you get this. So they've come to take control of him. He replied to them, who is my mother and who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father is in heaven, and my Father is my... boy, I blew that. He says, whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. What's your family like? I've done a lot of DNA research and ancestry research that was early on. The British DNA Project was one. And then after I've come to the States, I've done the Ancestry and the 23andMe and a few others to help hone DNA and help do some of that work. And every so often, one of them will hit me with an email saying, we found 12 more relatives. Click to see who they are. And I'm always going, I'm not so sure I want to do that. Some people live for that, and that's fine. It's actually a really nice hobby. It requires a lot of work and research and thought and such, and it's like an adventure. And so, good for you. Seriously, that's a fine thing. But in my family, there has been discord for generations. And that discord has been caused not by one person or 2 people, but by the bulk of us. And I say us. I've been involved in it too in my younger years. When I look at my family today, my family that I pray for every day, every single day, by name. I pray for my children, for the 2 that they married, and they married well. They really did. I pray for our grandkids, the only 5 perfect kids on the planet. Really sorry about yours. And then I pray for our safe harbor and everybody who listens, who shares this, who subscribes, who dips a toe in, or who's been with us from the beginning. And I pray for them every single day because you're my family. Now, do I have anybody else? Yes, I have a sister in Houston who she and I are really, really close. But truthfully, if I had a cousin walk in, I wouldn't recognize the one. We were separated from family because my father didn't feel that the rest of the family was religiously acceptable. And then our family itself fractured. And therefore, I don't go to a family reunion except on Sundays when I meet with our house church here at the Soundstage, like you meet with your house church, or you meet with us via video, or when I do a welcome home tour. Just a reminder, if we don't know your name and your address and your phone number, we can't tell you when I'm coming through and to gather a group together just to visit for a couple of hours. That's all we do. We don't take up a collection. We don't hit you up for anything. We just want to say hello and answer your questions if you've got any. But that's really it. It's a very casual thing. But you can send that information to us at info@oursafeharbor.com. And if you paused right now and did that, that would make us very happy. You're our family. When I go to Oklahoma City, Nashville, Tennessee, Nashville, Arkansas, when I go to Kingwood, Texas, or when I go to Spokane, Washington, when I go to any of these places, Columbus, Ohio, I can keep going. It is, that's my family right there. Those are my family. That's what Jesus taught me. And I want you to know you got a family. You can share your prayer concerns. Send it to prayer@oursafeharbor.com. And if you want it on the prayer wall for all of us to pray for, we can do that too. You want it quiet? Just those of us here will know. And we're really good at keeping our mouth quiet. Once again, we're family. And God defines family in a different way, does he not? Now we come upon chapter 13, and one of the best known of the Proverbs. And therefore, and actually it's really pretty well understood. So we're not going to have to dig too deep. Are you ready? The same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Imagine he needed a little bit of alone time. Such large crowds gathered, he never got it while around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while people all around stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell by the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on the rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good ground, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let them hear. Now, we're not going to tell you what it means yet, because that's part of the Matthew. The disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? In other words, why are you just telling them stories? Why don't you just say, all right, here's the new law, and here's some tablets of stone for you to take home and review later. Well, he says, the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. In other words, it's not quite ready. Whoever has will be given more, and they'll have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. A common expression back in the day. Basically, you get what you invest in it. The people who are ready to hear and invested will get it. Those who aren't won't get it. He had to prepare the ground. He had a limited amount of time. He says, that's why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they've closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. It's out of Isaiah 6, verses 9 and 10. Then he looks at his followers and he says, but blessed are you because your eyes see and your ears because they hear. Truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Just a word. That's all. Think of Zechariah, Zephaniah, Amos, Obadiah. Think of Isaiah. They would have just done anything to spend 10 minutes with Jesus, much less 3 years, 3 and a bit. But they didn't. They didn't get to do that. Think of the people in the world who are longing for the Prince of Peace in their life, for his grace, his mercy, his forgiveness. We need to get these stories to them. When you subscribe, when you like, when you hit the bell, when you share the address with others, when you talk to others about this, it matters. It is falling upon fertile soil. There are some who will forget what you said and move on. Others, however, have latched on. This week alone, I've gotten 5 messages from people who have just found us. And they're so very excited about this. Angels longed to have seen Christ do what you see him doing, not only with our safe harbor, but in all the universe. Let's share him. So now, the explanation. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. If you have any questions about this, please send them in to me, patrick@oursafeharbor.com. I think it's relatively plain, especially if you've been a church person and you've heard this talked about before. The seed continues to be sown, but it needs to find good hearts, hearts that are ready for Jesus, who are ready for this story, who are aching for the mercy and the peace of Christ. There's a reason why the stories of Christ reverberate more with the poor than they do with the very rich. Because often the very rich don't know that they need something else. But the very poor know they need. They're in need. And so we don't ignore the rich because, quite frankly, things such as suicide and addiction and divorce are as common and sometimes more common among the very rich than they are among the very poor. So we know they need Jesus, and maybe we'll catch them at the right time. We don't want their money. We want them to know about what Jesus has to give them. And with the poor, very often they're more open because they are aware they have needs. Well, Jesus is going to tell them another parable now. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. Well, this sounds familiar. Oh, plot twist, it isn't. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he said. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go pull them up?" "No," he said, "because while you're pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time, I'll tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." What's going on here? Well, he doesn't go on to hey, all right, disciples, here's what this means. So we do have to do a wee bit of explanation here. When you pull up the weeds, you might hurt an innocent stalk of wheat because the roots sometimes entwine. How you deal with evil is really important. how you deal with a disruptive individual, how you deal with any weed in your life is you got to be pretty careful. In a church, you could go through and say, well, I know that person, habitually gets drunk and has never admitted. I know that person's cheating on their wife. We're pulling them out of here. Do they have family there? Do they have children? Will word of this get to the children's school and to their classmates? Besides, our job is to sow the seed. We, the servants of Jesus, the sower, have been expressly told here, it's not our job to pull the weeds. It's not our job to get up in the morning and go, all right, it's time for us to go hunt some sinners. No, that's not what we're called to do. We're called to go love our neighbor as ourselves. We're told to go be like Jesus. He goes, there'll come a time where we're going to take care of the weeds, but God's going to take care of the weeds. You don't take care of the weeds. It's not your job. Wouldn't the world be a much nicer place if we all just understood that? Do you know that on the first currency, I'm told, that America had, "In God We Trust" is now on the currency. But that wasn't near the first currency we had. That was put on much, much later. The first currency said, "Mind your business." Now, they didn't mean what we mean when we say mind your own business. It meant, you are in charge of your finances. Be careful with your money. But I like to think of it the other way too. I need to mind my own business. I need to make sure I don't go through and have this self-righteous glee of victory because I won the argument and pulled up that stalk of wheat without thinking of the people I've hurt. Innocent people whose only fault, and it's not a fault, is that they love or are somehow connected to that person. We need to be very careful about this. And certainly don't go on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook with, "You're not a Christian if," or "You're only a Christian if." We are the servants. It is not our job to go around pointing and saying, "That's wheat, that's a weed, that's wheat, that's a weed." That's not humans' job. I get emails sometimes, "Well, what does our Safe Harbor believe about this kind of person or that kind of person?" That they're people made in the image of God. If you're asking, do we approve of everything that person does? I got news for you. I don't approve of everything anybody does, including me. But it's not my job to go tell them I don't approve. It's my job to go tell them about Jesus. And probably before I can tell them about Jesus, I'm going to have to show them Jesus by the way I treat them. Well, this next passage bothers me a bit, so I'm just going to tell you that going in. He told them another parable. "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it's the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches." By the way, I've had atheist friends come to me and say, "Aha, there's a problem. The mustard seed's not the smallest seed in the world." Jesus wasn't trying to teach botany. It was the smallest one they used. That's all they knew. So he's just saying, you know how tiny that is. All right? It's kind of like, we don't do that with other people. We don't do it with ourselves. My wife says, how was it on the golf course? And I say, I just had the best of times. Really? Really? You had a better time than the kid that got the pony? You had a better time than the guy that fell into the chocolate vat and you got to stay there for a day or two? We say things to make a point, and everybody knows what we mean. So he goes, it's a tiny seed, isn't it? You plant this tiny seed, wow. Then he told him another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all the way through the dough. Now, he didn't go on to really go into things. We're going to go into things because it's explained here in a bit. But I know a little bit about yeast and dough just because my mama used to make that. And there was a period of time when we first moved to America in the mid-'80s, my wife and the women in that town were all about homemade bread. And so if you ever went on vacation or something, you had to take your starter over to somebody else to babysit it, like your dog sitting or something. And when you got home, you have to go over and make sure my starter's healthy. Well, it was actually wonderful bread, so I'm not making fun of them. It was great stuff. That yeast, you got to protect it. But it just takes a little bit. You don't use much. You don't need an amazing amount of faith. You don't have to be a hero of the faith, possessed of massive amounts. No, take the faith you have. Now, I've been very open about my own struggles with faith and about how sometimes I feel like I don't have enough faith to do what I need to do. But here he's saying, yeah, you do. You do. And I learned from things such as the feeding of the 5,000, what God can do with just a little bit. And with his thought and no material at all, he can make the universe. So when we present him, even if our faith is so small, it's like the Grinch's heart. You got to get a microscope to see the thing. He can use that and build something amazing with it. So instead of thinking my faith's not enough, I just can't really, bring it to God and see what he'll do with it. Jesus spoke all of these things to the crowd in parables, and he didn't say anything to them without using a parable. So was fulfilled what was spoken through the prophet. This is out of Psalm 78. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden since the creation of the world. Then he left the crowd and went into his house, the house. The disciples came to him and said, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. I love that. Explain that. We didn't get it. He said, the one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man, and the field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. Okay, we got our players, got our parts. Now we got the story. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are the angels. They're not us. They do the sorting. We don't do the sorting. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of the Man will send out his angels, and they'll weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. Then they'll throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. And whoever has ears, remember that? Let them hear. One more. And then this was kind of out of place to me. This one, to me, should go right after the parable of the mustard seed and the yeast, because the parable of the weeds explained should go right in front of the parable of the net. But this may shock you, but God did not consult me when he put this together. So we're stepping away from this main point, but we're going to step back to it next week. All right? Main point of the next few verses, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in the field. Whenever a man found it, he hid it again. Then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Seems a little bit, well, okay. And the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he finds one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. What is he saying? It's our last verse for today. He's saying, this is worth everything. It's worth everything that you get what Jesus is laying out here. It is so freeing for me not to have to go through my life disapproving of everything and everybody, and not proving my own righteousness by, not here. But instead being free to love people wherever they are. And if eventually all they can muster up, no pun intended, is a mustard seed of faith, knowing that's a treasure we just found, that's worth everything. When you find Jesus, you found the treasure, you found the pearl. We have him. The good news is We don't have to hide our treasure by the field and hoard it to ourselves. We get to share him because you can't dilute Jesus by sharing. You can't dilute grace by being graceful. You can't dilute mercy by being merciful. There's enough of it to go around 1,000,000 times over, again and again, because that's the God we serve, and we see him in the person of Jesus. Thank you for loving us so much. Thank you for supporting us with your prayers and with the money that keeps us going. It means so very much to us. If we can love you better, let us know. Be at peace.